Hello, my random viewers, and welcome to Randomly Offensive. While doing my Tekken videos, I have been surfing the web to find content to either reread and comic books to reread or read for the first time if they flew by me in the past for my videos and to make content, but also just for fun and for nostalgic purposes, because I like nostalgia and rereading some of these comic books are just fantastic. However, in my wanders through the web, I found an article throwing shade at these comic books, and I do not like it. Though it is from a few years ago, I want to cover it and definitely poke holes at it because it talks as if it's a scholar, and it very well maybe have written by a Tekken scholar. However, I disagree with everything it has to say, and I'm definitely going to poke holes at it because unlike the live-action movie, and I will agree that the live-action Tekken movie was trash, it was garbage, it did not keep the continuity of the games, and it just didn't do a very good job displaying the characters. However, the comic books are a completely different deal because they do keep the continuity of the video games. All they are doing are expanding the character arc development and expanding the story from the video games into the comic books. So in a way, they're retelling the video games in a more detailed fashion because you cannot tell a very deep story in an arcade game. That is why Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat has these movies and animes. Street Fighter has an anime, and I really enjoyed it. There's a reason that these arcade games have anime and comic books alongside with them, retelling the story and expanding the story, and that's exactly what Tekken did. And these comic books are excellent, and anyone that's a fan of Tekken absolutely should give them a try because they are good comic books. And the flaws that this article has just doesn't make any sense, and I'm going to poke so many holes in it today, so let's get started. So, the strange history of Tekken Comics. This article is by Den of Geek. It states, despite its fun characters and over-the-top story, Tekken's attempts at comic book seems to fall apart before they can truly begin. And that's a broad statement, and I disagree, so absolutely let's see what this guy has to say. And I wonder if it brings up Titan Comics, or if he's just going to nitpick the lesser-known comics or the more unliked comic books. I'm looking forward to finding out. So, fighting game storylines lend themselves well to comic books. It's the nature of the stories which feature tons of characters, some ready-made conflicts, and excuses for fights to happen. Different games have led to different tie-ins. Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat each have a long history of comics of differing quality. Games like Darkstalkers, Killer Instinct, Primal Rage, Eternal Champions, and Virtual Fighter have had a couple minor releases here and there. But what of Tekken? In terms of US mainstream popularity, Tekken is up there with Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. The game's story would surely lend itself well to comic book adaptations, and yes, it did a handful of attempts. I don't like him saying attempts. Anyway, it's just that, well, there's a reason why nobody talks about them. I don't know. I don't know if, I know that Tekken has a lot of people that play the games, but I don't know if Tekken has a huge fandom, right? There's not a whole lot of YouTube coverage on Tekken. There's not a whole lot of content online on Tekken. The game is just a well-known game in the arcade era and in the arcade genre, and a lot of people like to play it, but I don't know if it has a huge fandom, which is probably why you don't hear a lot of people talking about the comic books. A lot of the content that I get for my videos are from the comic books. A lot of my best scenes that I tell in my videos are from the comic books. The Kazuo versus Heihachi fight, for example, or the best team-up Forever with King, Jin, Makujin, and Kuma going up against Ogre inside of Ogre's soul, that was all in comic book. Like, that wasn't in the game. And that was a great fight, and it was a great story. So I don't know if trying to say that nobody talks about it as a reason of why they're not good, in this sense, in this context, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that's fair. Like I said, the basic concept of Tekken storyline works. There's an evil, power-hungry criminal mastermind who holds a corporate and military chokehold on the world. He holds a fighting tournament for his amusement, and of all the combatants, only one man is able to stand up to him. Unfortunately, this man, his son, is just as corrupt as his father. As decades pass, their bloodlines reach, expand, and threatens to engulf the planet itself. Yeah, great story. I enjoy the Tekken story. We begin in late 1997 by this point. Tekken 3 had already released in arcades across the world and was only months away from taking the PlayStation by storm, becoming the second best-selling fighting game in history. Number one is Super Smash Bros. Brawl. See, I don't want to read about that. Comic company Nightstone released the Tekken Saga number 1. Okay, so the first one he's going to use is, of course, Nightstone. So I'm wondering if he's even going to bother with Titan Comics. Written by John Kim with art by Walter McDaniel. Coincidentally, it's not the only fighting game comic incident involving Walter McDaniel. He would go on to draw the infamous comic moment where Deadpool asked Kitty Pryde about Street Fighter before hitting her with a shuriken. That'd be funny. Then years later, Deadpool was doing shurikens in an actual Capcom video game based purely on that gig. Tekken Saga is easy to laugh at, but looking at it again years later, I'll admit it's more of a mixed bag. It tells the story leading up to the first Tekken game and does a pretty good job setting everything up without simply making it nothing but Heihachi versus Kazuha. The opening scene shows Heihachi Mishima talking to his 3 top underlings, who just happen to be the fathers of Michelle Chang, Eddie Gordo, and King. It's on the nose as well, but at least it's setting up a ton of stuff in its own way. Now, I do understand, I think I know where he's going with this. I do understand some of the continuity errors. For example, Heihachi going up against King's father. Because in this comic book, Heihachi does not kill King's dad. Meaning, King was an orphan. That is the continuity. That is the canon story of King. Of both of them is that they were orphans. And they lost their father or father figure at a very young age. So with that being said, if this would have actually happened, unless King didn't know about it, he would definitely be wanting vengeance upon Heihachi, which is never mentioned in any other comic. And he's using Nightstone, which is somewhat canon, but it's not official. So, again, I think he's nitpicking comic books here. Instead of introducing the Devil Gene, the comic talks up the Toshin Stones, which Heihachi wants in order to power himself up and rule the world. Bernard Chang secretly has 2 of the 3 and opposes him. Getting himself killed for his efforts, Kazuha ends up getting powered by 1, which is supposed to explain the jewel-like third eye that comes from his devil form. Now, McDaniel's art is mostly fine on its own. He even does a snazzy drawn recreation of a rendered promo image from Tekken 2, which is used as a pin-up at the end. If anything, it's the overall design that makes this thing harsh to look at. The word bubbles look like hell, and the text is clown shoes to the third degree. Now, I don't know, because if you look at these, they're not actually all that bad. I have seen other comics, like this one right here. I've seen many comics that have this same quality that are a good read. Not everyone that's a professional artist is going to have jaw-dropping art, right? Like, you don't have to be the best of the best in order to publish good stories. So just because this isn't the best art you've ever seen does not mean that it's not good art. It is good art. The guy just wasn't the best of the best, but he did his best, and that's all that counts. Where does one start? I thought bubble coming out of Heihachi's first, the MS Paint word bubbles. The cavalcade, I don't know what that word is, of fonts. The narration, gradients, okay, I see they used a money sign for the word shit. Okay, well sure, I mean if you're trying to make it PG, that makes sense. Kazuha, pissed that his father horribly scarred him into training session for the hell of it, then misses a jump kick and falls to his supposed death. Yeah. Okay, the guy's right. I mean, this is not it's not the best comic, but like I said, it's Nightstone. What do you expect? I wonder if he talks about other comics. I really do. Because if he doesn't, I'm going to. Let's see. In the end, Kazuha throws Heihachi off a cliff and boasts about how he'll take over the world. Nothing says Tekken 2 comic more than retelling the story of the first game. You could argue that obviously the next issue would be about Tekken 2, but despite the promise of an issue focused on Anna versus Nina, Nightstone never would release that second. Right, because it wasn't a good one, meaning he didn't get another chance. But they did go on to other creators that told other ones, and he was just dissing on Nightstone's art. And this is beautiful art right here. This is beautiful comic drawing. And this looks like it's from Titan. No, this one isn't quite from Titan. This would be from something else. Let's see. Tekken Forever has better art and better lettering and design. That's for damn certain. The fight scenes flow way better, and the battle between Paul and Kazuha is pretty rad. On a storytelling level, it's a complete mess. Back with the Nightstone stuff, they at least decided to build it up from the beginning and did an okay job with it. They laid the foundation for the first game's story before completing it and building towards the next two games. Ugly as it was a story you could easily follow. Okay? Tekken Tag Tournament is a non-canon game that merges characters from the first two Tekken games with Tekken 3, which takes place nearly 20 years later. There's stuff in there that's never meant to be explained because it's nothing more than a dream match showcase, so you have to introduce someone to the plot of Tekken, the next generation of Tekken, and the inexplicable batshit stuff surrounding a werewolf-possessed woman dressed only in sludge, all while telling a 4-issue story. So how do you begin this epic arc? Just throw us in the middle of it with no explanation, I suppose. Okay, I will get into this real quick. Hold on. In case you're wondering, he's telling Bruce to knock off singing. Let the bodies hit the floor by drowning pool. Bruce sings it with 5 exclamation points, which is way too loud no matter how much you enjoy that song. But yeah, the comic starts off right after Kazuha Mishima beats up more than half the roster by himself, including Heihachi and Unknown, which is the werewolf chick. It honestly feels like it could have been a follow-up to the Nightstone comics if the reader missed out on 10 issues in between. It's so jarring and never gets around to feeling coherent. So, and I have a feeling because I just saw a picture, I have a feeling he's going to start talking about the fight between Lai, Yoshimitsu, and Brian, and I'm going to have to get into that. However, with this here, so if you read Tekken Forever, it does take place right after Tekken 3. The reason they included Tekken Tag Tournament in the beginning of the comic book was for the simple and pure fact that it revitalized the series, and it was their first installment for PS2. And it reinterested people into the game, which allowed them to do these comics, which allowed them to build up enough income to make Tekken 4, which was the true sequel on the PS2. Now, the graphics for Tekken Tag Tournament are pretty close to the quality of Tekken 3, but it was for the PS2. But it had almost Tekken 1 graphics, where Tekken 4 had damn near PS3 level graphics. Very good graphics. And they spent a lot of time and a lot of money on Tekken 4, but they needed Tekken Tag Tournament to do that. And if Tekken Tag Tournament is the cause of your franchise being revitalized, you're absolutely going to have to include it in some way, shape, or form. So, it does, if you don't skip the very first page, which has no pictures, it's just a long page of words of a story, it will explain exactly what's going on in between Tekken 3 and Tekken 4. They decided to include Tekken Tag Tournament events, however, they chopped it down to a point where Kazuha basically breaks into the arena because Heihachi thought he was dead. He breaks into the arena and challenges every fighter that are on the match, and he takes them all down, including Heihachi. That way Tekken 4 starts back up where Tekken 3 left off, right? So they needed to clean that slate. Also, it was a way to use fan favorite characters that were not in Tekken 4 or Tekken 3, but they were revitalized from Tekken 1 and Tekken 2 into Tekken Tag Tournament. And so by doing that, they had a whole new roster of characters. Because, I mean, think about it, if you imagine Tekken 3 characters and Tekken Tag Tournament characters and Tekken 4 characters, that is damn near 80 to 90 characters. You gotta knock half of them off. And half, that's not even a lot. So it was definitely absolutely needing to be done, and I don't think it actually affected the story. Now, here we go. We're gonna go chop right into this one, and I would love to knock this one down. There's even an interlude involving Lai, Wulong, and Yoshimitsu versus Brian Fury that doesn't feel connected to anything. Okay, the comic then ends just as it begins. Kazuha beats everyone up, and we get a cliffhanger where he's planning on killing Ling Xiaoyu so he can absorb all of Jin's devil powers. And that is a story I don't want to get into because that's spoiler for my own channel. So, with the fight with Brian, Lai, and Yoshimitsu, this is where Yoshimitsu gets his hand cut off. This is also the issue where Lai is being seen truly as the cop that he is. And there again is an interlude, a beginning sheet in this comic book. It just doesn't have pictures. You just have to read it like a book, and that's okay. You read it, and then it goes into the comic style. And what it is Brian has been breaking into science facilities, looking for a certain person that I don't want to get into for when I tell his story on my channel. However, when you are talking about Brian, this guy is a bad guy. He kills a lot of people. He does a lot of public damage. He destroys everything in sight, and the guy is capable of bringing down a helicopter with his bare hands. He's basically like an evil Captain America on steroids. And so Yoshimitsu is an ancient protector Lai is a police officer. When these two meet up, and they do meet up in the continuity of the video game, they do team up in the continuity of the video game, so everyone already knows that are big enough fans to read the comics, everyone knows that Yoshimitsu and Lai are already together. Also, everyone already knows that Lai has been hunting Brian for quite some time. So even if you don't read the interlude before the actual comic strip, it doesn't affect the coherence and the continuity of the story, and it's a very exciting fight. If you read it just for the fight, you're going to love it. So we're going to go down here. Let's see. There have been a couple examples of Tekken manga out there, but for this article, I'm only focusing on the stuff that was readily available in the US. That would bring us to Tekken Comics in 2009 and 2010. So now he's looking at these are fan-made. He's looking at the fan-made comics. Appearances online on Ultra Jump's website for a time. Ryu Takaru's 11th chapter series is a pretty fun time. Yes, and this one's going to talk about Asuka Kazuma, and tie in the Tekken 6 events. But again, it's on Ultra Jumps. This is fan-made. This is not canon. You can't count this. These are all fan-made comics. Let's see. Street Fighter X Tekken, again, not canon. Yeah. Let's see. As of this writing, blah 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 blah. So that is that's all he's got. He's got basically him bashing on fan-made comics, which I don't think is cool. He nitpicked Nightstone. Took one comic out of the Tekken Forever series. There's tons of them. And he didn't even mention Titan Comics. So yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and share my thoughts after reading this article, and then we will end this video. So, if you are going to bash on a genre, and if you're going to bash on a franchise, especially in the comic book realm, you have to acknowledge all the good comics and explain why, even with those, it is not a good series. He did not do that, and he left out Titan completely. He only mentioned one Tekken Forever comic book, and a lot of these comic books have great stories to tell. And like I said in the beginning of the video, there are so many amazing stories that I'm using in my YouTube videos from the comics because of how good they are and how captivating they are. And they really, really do capture the actual emotions of the characters. And they expand on the stories just so well. Some of Paul's best moments, which I had to leave out when I covered Paul's story because they go alongside with other characters, and I felt like it'd be a better storytelling tool to use him on the side. But there's so many great moments with Paul, and he becomes like a father figure, grandpa figure to so many Tekken characters in the comic books. You only get it in the comic books. And King's trauma, King's tragedy, you only get from the comics. Lee's awesome and brilliant intellect is only shown in the comics. The pain that Heihachi goes through, the pain that Kazuha goes through, the pain and will to survive that Jin experiences is also only shown in the comic books. And so the comic books are absolutely needed for the true fans and the fandom of Tekken, but it's also needed for me. I need the comic books in order to tell, because I do use creative liberties in the fights somewhat. But if I can take the really good ones from the comic books and retell them so that other people can experience my joy and my passion and the love for Tekken, then absolutely I'm going to use them. And he left out all the Titan comics, which are the best comics when it comes to Tekken. And the Tekken Forever series is great. Yes, he pointed out that it started out in the middle of nowhere during a very big arc. However, you can fill in the bits and pieces after playing the video games, which most people are not going to pick up these comics until after playing these video games over and over and have become such big fans that they want more, and then they go to the comic book, so you already know what's going on. And so with that being said, I don't think he was being very fair with Tekken. I do think he was bashing it and throwing shade at it just because it is lesser known. These comic books are lesser known. It was an easy target. And I don't know why he did it, but I don't like it, I don't appreciate it, and I don't know if true fans of these comics and of the Tekken franchise would appreciate it also. Like I said, this is it's a few years old. This article's a few years old, but I have not found anybody defending the comic books after this article, so I decided to do it. And yeah, that is all I have to say for today. This was kind of a boring one, so if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for hanging in there. And don't get hit by a meteor. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye.